Hello and welcome to Pluribus Unum's Fireside Chats. Not as good as FDR's, but hey, it's something. Now, this episode, I'll just be really real. I think a majority of you probably already pieced together the episode by this point. And I'll be real, I'm only doing this episode specifically so I can get this one out of the way. I've been dreading this one for a while now, but again, way to get this one out of the way. Especially considering, well, I'm not going to give that away quite yet. Another thing is that when this episode comes out, I've released a image that shows all the people that I potentially might do thoughts on episodes on. And I want you all to pick the one that I do. Like, of those ones picked, of those ones that I posted, I want you all to pick the one. And whoever gets the most votes, and the vote can be however it is, you can all comment the same name underneath. You can find one person with a vote, with a comment already, and you can like that comment. Or basically any method that you want to say to get a vote in. And whoever is the winner of that one, I will guarantee that I will do that one at one point. With all that out of the way, let's get right into the news. First, some more news coming from Guatemala. Well, unfortunately, Guatemala's political situation isn't necessarily been going good. You see, some Guatemalan prosecutors conducted a raid on the facilities of the main electoral tribunal in Guatemala, which has led to a lot of uncertainty over whether or not the incumbent administration will allow a transfer of power to Arevalo. And Arevalo made a drastic decision and has pulled his support from this current administration's transfer to power, because he's saying that they're doing everything they can to stop him, saying that this is basically their last-ditch effort to cause a coup, and he's basically one step away from calling his supporters into the streets to protest these events. And we really don't know what the heck is going to happen next. Like, we're just at the moment we're all at the edge of our seats trying to figure out what the heck is going on. Speaking of trying to figure out what the heck is going on, here is a situation regarding the Internet Archive, which a lot of you might not know. So, for those who don't know, the Internet Archive, or the variation of the Internet Archive that you all are probably most familiar with, the Wayback Machine, it is an internet library that was released in 1996 and has basically been a carrier of information for, like, a while. Like, they take a lot of books, they scan them, and then provide a free internet version of them to be seen. However, they function in a rule very similar to a real library. Like, if you go to a real library and the book that you want is checked out, you can't get that book. And the Internet Archive functioned in a very similar way. If someone else had that book checked out, they would not give you access to that book, despite the fact that they could do so. However, if the library has two books, they'll lend it out twice. Same with the Internet Archive. If they had 2 copies of the book, they could lend 2 copies of the digital version. However, then the COVID pandemic happened, and when the COVID pandemic happened, the Internet Archive decided to do something very drastic, and decided that due to the fact that a lot of children would not be able to go to school, and a lot of people probably wouldn't be able to go to real-life libraries, that they would actually suspend all of the license agreements that they had that made them need to do it this way. That way, they could just give anybody any copy of any book digitally with no repercussions. However, in doing so, many of the authors of the books were mad, stating that that infringed on the licensing agreement that they had with the Internet Archive. So then they went to court about it. And unfortunately, the court case did not do so hot for the Internet Archive, but the Internet Archive is intending to appeal the case. And many people are a bit worried about what this could mean if the Internet Archive ends up losing the case entirely, with many people thinking that it could possibly bring an end to the Internet Archive and the Wayback Machine. Now, if you know anything about my stances on copyright, which I have made a video about, you would know that I am basically 100% on the Internet Archive side in this issue. In fact, I would even go a step further and say that instead of having it just be during the COVID pandemic, it should be the case forever. My viewpoint is that all information should be free and readily available to people, regardless of anything. All news articles should be free and not behind a paywall. All like documentaries should be available free for anybody to watch. All the books that are in the Internet Archive should be free for anybody to listen to, like, read. Hopefully the Internet Archive manages to win their case, and we won't have to lose a very valuable resource. Speaking of not losing valuable resources, the Squad, because AIPAC is making it very abundantly clear that this is the year that they're trying to take down the Squad for good. Or at the very least, they're floating more potential challenges for big targets. The Squad, as of now, currently has 8 members: Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, Rashida Tlaib, Jamal Bowman, Cori Bush, Greg Casar, and Summer Lee, each of them being notable in various areas. And one of the most particular areas that these group of legislators have been known to talk about is the issue of Israel, all but one of them being extremely critical of Israel. The one notable exception is Greg Casar, who is the, I guess, most pro-Israel of the Squad. I don't necessarily know if he's had like a big Israel vote as of now, but he's definitely the one that is more like just okay with Israel. Meanwhile, the rest of them range from full-on anti-Zionist, or at least something that is close to anti-Zionism, to basically just criticism of Israel. The most notable ones that have been doing this are AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and Cori Bush, with Summer Lee, Ayanna Pressley, and Jamal Bowman kind of like teetering. I think maybe Lee is more in line with the other 4, or maybe it's like this, where it's like Omar, Tlaib, and Bush are completely in the full-on, like, basically borderline anti-Zionism. Then you got AOC and Summer Lee, which are sort of like teetering a little bit on like close to that. And then you got Jamal Bowman and Ayanna Pressley, which are a bit more pro-Israel than them, but not really pro-Israel. And then you got Greg Casar, who is the outlier. However, in almost all their bids, I guess again with the exception of like maybe Pressley and Casar, they all got targeted by the Israeli lobby, and a lot of them have continued to remain Israel lobby opponents, like people who are focusing, like, that the Israeli lobby is focusing their attention to. And it seems this cycle is kind of now starting to realize, because, like, we have a couple of these people have been in elections for a while, so we've seen the weaknesses and strengths of some. Meanwhile, others, we don't know. So basically, AIPAC is looking at these 8 members, well, I guess 7, maybe 6, because I don't know if Presley's had like a extremely critical analysis of Israel. But then again, it doesn't really matter to AIPAC, because it's like they were the ones who kicked Andy Levin out of the seat, even though he was a Jewish member of Congress, and they're like decrying anti-Semitism, but then they literally kicked out a Jewish member of Congress. But anyways, we've seen which one of these candidates are good in races. AOC, Rashida Tlaib, have basically pulled off victory after victory after victory. Ayanna Pressley, she doesn't really have any people running against her. And in Massachusetts, that's not really a viable option to primary an incumbent Democrat. That's just not a viable option. I mean, discount the fact that Ayanna Pressley proves that it is a viable option. But it has to be like a very specific way to do it. Meanwhile, I don't think Jamal Bowman or Cori Bush have had any real primary challenges as well. And Casar and Lee, they just got in, so they don't really have any, like, they did good to get into the race initially, but they haven't really shown the ability to maintain the seat. And Ilhan Omar has unfortunately shown that she does have weaknesses. So AIPAC is basically revealing, like, they already showed that they were planning on getting someone to run against Jamal Bowman, but now they're trying to get people to run against Ilhan Omar and Summer Lee, basically indicating that those are the 3 targets that they're going to have. Like, AIPAC has tried to, like, target all of the people at once or whatever, but it just never works. So they're doing it like this. This is the strategy they're going to take. So anyways, now let's move on to the next couple of stories, which are basically indicators to show how far-right authoritarian the GOP has become, and an indicator to anybody in my audience that if you're not backing the Dems in this election, then it's just like, literally just objectively, what the heck are you doing? Okay, so first we have Marjorie Taylor Greene suggesting that states should consider seceding from the Union if Republicans don't get their way, which is nothing new. The GOP has consistently been advocating for what they've been calling a national divorce, which seemed to be the nice way of saying secession, but now they're just openly just calling it secession. It's especially interesting coming from Green, who is in a state that is very much blue now, or at least bluing. And you want to know how that happened? People turned out to vote. Seriously, all you guys gotta do is turn out to vote, and then these guys won't even be a problem no more. But voting, like, of course we know voting isn't necessarily the end-all be-all of the situation. There's a lot of other things to go with it, but that's definitely one of the first steps. Especially considering very interesting coming out from North Carolina, where an individual has just announced that they will be running for Congress. The candidate in question is a man by the name of Mark Harris, who's going to be running in the 8th district, which is an open red district. Now, for a lot of you, Mark Harris might not be a name that you recognize, especially if you're not from North Carolina. So let me regale you the story of the last time Mark Harris ran for a seat. The last time Mark Harris ran for an office was in 2018 when he ran in the North Carolina 9th district. And in that race, he was going against a Democrat named Dan McCready. And the race was a very close one. That was considered one of the closest seats in the area. Like, literally, it was really close. It was literally 905 votes in between the two candidates. Harris had the slight edge, so he was declared the victor. But then, the North Carolina Democratic Party filed some affidavits with the State Board of Voters decrying potential voter fraud in the race. The allegation being that Mark Harris had sent out independent contractors to collect unsealed absentee ballots from voters, then altered them before sending them into the State Board of Elections. And due to this investigation, the State Board of Elections decided to not certify the election and then look into the fraud. And then it turns out that these allegations were 100% correct, and that Harris was literally just flat out trying to rig the election in his favor. Even to the point where he was getting absentee ballots that didn't have any voter related to them, and he was just sending them in. You know, the thing that Republicans are mad that allegedly happened to Trump, they're going to run that guy in this seat. They're going to run him. Like, again, like, I mean, I hate to say this because you know how I don't like to do this. It's pretty obvious. The GOP projecting, the GOP doesn't care about the actual issues, and the GOP would happily do this if it benefited them, and they fully intend to do it. If they're just going to flat out run this guy for office, then it just shows that they just don't care, and we're going to be seeing a lot of that in this episode. And the last bit of news that actually shows the GOP shifting to the right is that GOP Senator Mitt Romney has decided to announce that he will not be seeking a second term in the United States Senate. Very, very big deal. Like, most people don't necessarily understand the impact. Like, a lot of people do, and also don't at the same time. So, Mitt Romney was basically, anyway, it's kind of weird. I mean, maybe it's a little bit, maybe there's like still a little bit of it, but like, he was considered sort of the last wing of the Rockefeller Republicans. Like, I mean, for a majority of his political career, he was considered a liberal Republican. The only time where he didn't really have that notion was in his presidential run a little bit, but he kind of had it, but he also kind of didn't. He sort of like teetered on the line, like, well, I mean, I like to get things done. But Romney, and by extension McCain, have painted themselves to be like a stark contrast to the new wave of the GOP that was rising under Trump. Now, McCain had a very short period of time where he could be that opposition figure, but Romney decided to stay around and became a very big voice against Trump, openly stating he didn't vote for Trump at either time, voting to convict Trump in both of his impeachment trials, and crossing the line to support some things on the Democratic side, most particularly voting to support Ketanji Brown Jackson to the Supreme Court, despite the fact that the rest of the GOP was basically, ooh, we hate her. Well, he's of course maintained a lot of criticisms, especially considering he's still a Republican he's still a Republican, so he voted to confirm Trump Supreme Court justices otherwise. Even Amy Coney Barrett, even though it was that whole thing where it was like, you know, wondering if they would do it only on the principle of keeping the seat open. But at the end of the day, he was more right than most of the GOP. So many people were expecting for him to remain in the GOP, at the very least to maintain some sort of essence anti-Trump. But for some reason, he decided to, he says that he's going to retire. Now, here's the thing. The current polls that have been conducted in the race don't show a competitive primary. It shows Romney winning. And I guess we have to take into consideration his stated reason for retiring. Literally just, he wants new faces in Washington. I mean, I guess we'll see Romney around sometime whenever he does something else. Speaking of someone else that we're going to have to be seeing, now let's finally get into the main topic of this video. This episode is the one where we're going to be talking about Nick Fuentes. Now, for those of you who, for some reason, don't necessarily understand what my viewpoints on Nick Fuentes are, Nick Fuentes is a far-right racist white supremacist. I don't like him. I fully denounce everything that he has stood for. He has said so many things that are just blatantly untrue, blatantly try-hard, blatantly edgelordish. So, yeah, pretty obvious to say I am not a fan. If that's all you're here to see, then the door is that way. You can just head out now. If you want to stay for certain things, I guess, then by all means, stick around so you can hear me talk about Nicholas Joseph Fuentes. Nick Fuentes is very similar to a lot of the newer modern day pundits on the independent media sphere, I guess. Getting their start in late high school, hosting a radio and TV station. Well, actually, I guess that's a little different, but he basically hosted some news format on that thing, espousing basically normie conservative attitudes. Then he began hosting a show called America First with Nicholas J. Fuentes, which began in 2017 during his freshman year at Boston University. And I don't know if he had completely different, in between high school and growing up, this time period basically aligns very well with the rise of Donald Trump and the alt-right. So I'm going to take a wild guess and say that Nick Fuentes either had normie conservative views and then went online, saw all these far-right, far-right, alt-right type stuff, and then he was just ooh, I like it, and then jumped on that trend. And almost immediately he became a superstar in his field, because being of the generation that was being brainwashed by the literal Nazis, he was very much able to speak to them on their level. And one of the biggest things that they did was use irony, because Gen Z really loved irony, but not in typical ways that you use irony. I've talked about this before, and a lot of other people who've discussed the alt-right and far-right elements discussed this before, but see, back in the day, you actually couldn't just openly be a far-right POS. You see, that was typically frowned upon. So, what people usually did to mask their further right elements was to disguise them in more moderate positions. You weren't against jailing all black people. You were for law and order. You weren't for keeping your country majority white. You were for strengthening border security. You weren't for controlling women. You were for the sanctity of life. But the people who were further right wanted to just openly be further right. And then they noticed something. They noticed a lot of people were parodying these further right principles by being ironically for them. Like, they would make an ironic joke insinuating that they were, like, far right. And then they would just go like, nah, we're just joking around. But then, what the far right people ended up doing was they ended up taking that caricature and then becoming that caricature, claiming, no, we're just joking around. We're just joking around. And then that made people think, oh, so what they really are, they clearly have some right-wing tendencies, but they're clearly, like, hyping it up. They're making it, like, a bit more, like, hyperbolic, I guess. Which is the thing that a lot of people fell for previously. Like Stephen Colbert. Stephen Colbert openly just made a show where he pretended to be a right-wing person, like a decently right-wing conservative for a while. But a lot of people genuinely thought that he was a conservative, but he was just playing it up, as a character. Sort of like a continuation of, like, conservative shock jocks, like Rush Limbaugh, who, again, did similar things. He was further right than typical conservatives, but it was kind of like in the veneer of, like, being a character of himself. A similar thing is also known for another person who is very similarly related to the alt-right, Alex Jones, where it's like, does he really believe in all the stuff that he's saying? It's like, no. Is he playing up the character? Maybe, but it's like he's trying to lead you still down the conspiratorial rabbit hole. And the YouTuber Iiɔwych goes over how this works with the circle of irony. You could look it up yourself, but I remember it so well because it's a good point to talk about this. On one end, you have sincere thought. In this case, they're actual genuine political views. They have irony, which would be, in this case, them parroting the opposite political views. Then, next, they have post-irony, which is them making fun of themselves. And then on the last layer, you have meta-irony. And you place that last one above sincerity because what they're doing is they're saying sincere things, but they're saying it as if they're joking. And that is basically the entire crux of Nick Fuentes' show, where he'll say an extremely far-right political view, and then it's basically worded and said as if it's a joke, but it's his completely sincere political thought. And the reason why it's worded that way is literally so they can walk away and say, oh, no, we're just joking. It's a joke. And that happens with Fuentes a lot. One big example is when he did Holocaust denial, because the way he worded his Holocaust denial was he worded it as if it were cookies, which is a common thing that the far right loves to do, where for some reason this is the way they word it. They literally try to word it as if it's cookies. Like, there's no way that we could cook this amount of cookies in this amount of time. I don't know the specifics of it because it's just complete and utter BS. It's just stupid. It's like, what is this? And of course, this has sort of led him to be sort of the figurehead of the alt-right, putting him in contrast with certain other political figures on the right, such as Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro. Because while Ben Shapiro and Charlie Kirk also rose around the time of, like, Trump-style populism, they sort of represent a different faction of conservatism. Even though, realistically, all three of them have literally the same audience. With the only exception being that Fuentes' audiences probably has certain people that are not as enthused to listen to the other two. I honestly do believe that a lot of people who listen to Ben Shapiro do listen to Nick Fuentes as well, and a lot of people who listen to Charlie Kirk also listen to Nick Fuentes. Though to be fair, I guess Ben Shapiro and Nick Fuentes probably has the least amount of overlap, for very obvious reasons. But yeah, Fuentes has taken this notoriety and has taken it places, I guess. You can't deny he's successful. He has his own army of people called the Groypers. He's gone to many different big, notable right-wing rallies, including but not limited to the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville and the January 6th insurrection. And he's even formed his own convention called America First PAC, where he has gotten members of Congress who are both sitting and not sitting, and managed to get an actual meeting with Donald Trump. He is very notable and very influential within the GOP. Yes, we live in a world where in the United States, one of the two major parties is literally holding meetings consistently with a known neo-Nazi. And not just a neo-Nazi who knows how to adapt. Because back in the early days, neo-Nazis openly hated Muslims, like American Nazis and the American far right hated Muslims. That was their one pet issue. That was their key opener to getting into American discourse. Muslims. Fuentes' first public, controversial statement being the fact that he didn't think that Muslims were considered, people who could fall under the First Amendment due to the fact that he's in the idiotic belief that the United States was founded as a Christian nation. And again, a lot of people on the far right in the United States, one of their big pet issues, one of the things that led to the alt-right becoming a big thing was this belief that people on the left were going too soft on radical Islam. Well, now, Nick Fuentes is just openly praising radical Islam. He loves the Taliban because he understands the point that the left has been making for a long time. Fundamentalist Christians bad, fundamentalist Muslims bad. They both lead to the same end goal. They just use different words. He's one of the very few people on the right that can be honest and say the quiet part out loud, because he just fully acknowledges that his belief system will lead to objectively worse things, especially his view on women, or in his case, girls, because apparently Nick Fuentes is currently being cancelled for statements that he has said repeatedly over and over and over again. Most prominently, his statement relating to underage girls, when it became well known that one of his buddies, Congressman Matt Gaetz, just really loves a 17-year-old girl, he made a very interesting statement.
Maybe we as a society need to rethink what constitutes moral sexuality. Because we live in a society where age of consent law is the gospel. Age of consent law, if you violate that, crucify the man. Female teachers are having sex with middle school boys all the time. Nobody cares about that. But it's a large age gap between an older man and a younger girl. God forbid. But homosexuality and trans and in between and this and that, no, but that's all perfectly okay. I think society that we live in has to rethink a little bit what they believe is moral and immoral sexuality. Large age gap, 17, I don't know that that's really a world-shattering, terrible thing. I don't even know that it's necessarily immoral, other than that it was premarital. If Matt Gaetz had married her, I'd say, well, if he married her with her consent and the consent of the parents, this is completely moral. It's very traditional. And honestly, this is how it always used to be.
And this is all going on when the GOP is trying to accuse the LGBTQ community of groomers, which Nick Fuentes himself has also done, but he's just openly saying that he doesn't care. Nick Fuentes, he's the one that's open about it. He legitimately doesn't care. If he had the opportunity to be with an underage girl, he would. Don't take my word for it. Nick himself said it.
Red pill take, TikTok pilled, red pilled. You know, it's like everybody was asking me, what do you think about Dixie D'Amelio? And I look her up and I'm like, she's hot. Everyone's like, she's 15, she's 15. I'm like, oh no, I was kidding, never mind. Give me a break. Teacups, WTF, that's all a joke though. That's all a joke. Look, Dixie D'Amelio, hot. Okay, I'm just gonna say it. Just saying. Okay, sue me. Call me whatever you want. She's hot. And you have to work your way backward from that. You know, some people, that's their approach. Some people, they'll discover something and they're like, wait a minute, but I'm not supposed to think that. I will not think that anymore. And I'm red pilled because I work my way backwards. I'm like, well, I know that this is true. Let's work our way backward and let's see if we can justify, the standards for thought and language. I'm like, let's start from this axiomatic truth that Dixie D'Amelio is hot. Well, let's reverse engineer this, right? But some people don't think, they're like, Dixie D'Amelio is hot. Wait, she's 15. She cannot be hot. So, there's a lesson in that. There's a lesson in that, unironically.
Imagine having an audience after you literally just admitted that you find an underage girl hot. It's just like, what? I guess this dude can make it in Hollywood. And Nick has this planned out in his head. He has envisioned this fantasy. He literally has a plan for when he's older.
Bitch, I want to drink it straight from the tap. I want it raw. I don't want to wait a moment. Right when the milk is good, I want to start drinking the milk. Same thing goes with women. I don't want to turn 30 and find some 20-year-old, 29-year-old woman that I have something in common with, and it's like, hey, properly aged, like wine. Women don't age like wine, they age like milk. They don't age like wine. That's not how their hormones work. That's not how they work. Yeah, I gotta find my 16-year-old wife. Probably when I turn 30 or something. Because here's the thing, I don't want to be like, let's say I get married to a 18-year-old now. 6-year age difference. When I turn 40, she's going to be 34. Ew. What if I'm 30 and she's 16? 14-year age difference. When I'm 50, she'll be 36. When I'm 40, she'll be 26. Then now we're talking here. Now we're cooking with gas. Now you can see an alternative vision for how things could be. I want a 16-year-old that's untouched, pristine, untouched, uncorrupted, innocent. That's what we all want. And all 16-year-olds want an older guy who's like capable and strong and everything to sweep them off their feet. That's what everybody wants. That's what everybody wants.
Yeah, Marjorie Taylor Greene meets with people talking about protect the children and is best buddies with Matt Gaetz and Nick Fuentes. Double standard in the GOP? Never thought I'd see the day. Now, Nick Fuentes actually has something very interesting regarding all of this. You see, Nick Fuentes, despite being all in on this traditional, marriage and all that other stuff, like traditional relationships, whatever, he himself is a noted bachelor. And it doesn't seem like he's had any real interest in women, really, that much. Now you see, that's because Fuentes has self-described himself as an incel, because that is also part of the rabid man movement in the alt-right spheres. A lot of nerdy men being dragged into farther right circles due to the fact that they can't get women. However, Fuentes has even gotten, derision in that movement because he himself technically isn't an incel. Because an incel is an involuntary celibate. Meaning someone who, without any choice of will, has chosen to, without any ability to choose so, isn't, in a relationship or hasn't had sex yet. And some people insinuating that Fuentes might be gay. But Fuentes has kissed a girl, so many people say, he's not celibate. So Fuentes has actually taken an interesting step, which is the step that basically all of these further right, anti-women, anti-SJW type people usually end up being.
What, people calling me gay because I've never had a girlfriend? I think if anything, it makes me less gay. If anything, it makes me not gay. As opposed to less gay. Not that there's any gay, but it makes me not gay. Well, because think about it this way. Gay people do date girls all the time. Real. And when I said on Elijah Schaefer's show, and they said, have you ever been in a romantic, have you ever had sex with a girl? And I said, no. If you name searched me on Twitter, as I always do, all these gay people are coming out and saying, I've had more girlfriends than Nick. I've had sex with more girls than Nick. So like I said last week, not only is that thinking flawed, but actually it's the reverse. That actually makes me really more heterosexual than anybody. If we're really being honest, never having a girlfriend, never having sex with a woman, really makes you more heterosexual. Because honestly, dating women is gay. Having sex with women is gay. And having sex with men is gay. And it's all gay. And if you want to know the truth, the only really straight heterosexual position is to be an asexual incel. That's it. So that's all there is. Being a MGTOW asexual incel is really the straightest position that you can have. Having sex in itself is gay, I think. I think that it's really a gay act to begin with. Think about it this way. What's gayer than being like, I need cuddles. I need kisses. Oh, I need the... It's all very sus to me, you know. I need to spend time with a woman. That's a little sus.
Now, I mean, either way you look at it, Nick Fuentes is sort of LGBTQ. Because if we take him by his word, then he has admitted to being asexual, which is LGBTQIA. But most people kind of insinuate that he's just flat out gay. I mean, to be fair, manner of his speech kind of, and his theatrical persona, kind of sus, to be honest. And I think one of the biggest things that kind of shows his sort of susness in regards to this and the thing that I mentioned previously is just this weird circle that he has chosen to surround himself with in regards to the Kanye West 2024 campaign. You see, Kanye West's 2024 campaign has 4 main people in it that are advisors to Kanye. Nick Fuentes is one. Then there's Milo Yiannopoulos, Ali Alexander, and Nicholas Kende Bolizani, also known as the YouTuber Sneeko, who is a far-right conservative Muslim. And all 4 of them have very suspect natures in regards to underage people, and at least 3 of them have very suspect natures in regards to gayness. Nick Fuentes, of course, being his whole thing about like not dating girls, being very suspiciously bachelor. Also, he had a date with a femboy. That's literally a thing that happened. Ali Alexander was mentioned in a news story at one point, but he was recently charged with trying to sext underage boys. And Milo Yiannopoulos, well-known far-right provocateur, who openly had a relationship with his pastor when he was younger, and then went on multiple podcasts to advocate that relationship was beneficial to him and that more people should do it. And Sneeko, as far as I know, doesn't have any suspect nature in regards to him being gay, but he does have suspect nature in regards to underage people because he has praised the Netflix movie Cuties, which is a movie that features girls around the age of 11 frequently twerking and doing sexual dances. And many people say, like, no, it's for the art. It's like, no. If that's the kind of art you want to do, just don't do it. And that's basically where I can wrap it up. Because it's just like, again, like, basically, there's nothing in here that hasn't been said already about Nick Fuentes. The only reason I'm doing this episode is, again, just to get it out of the way. Just so that I don't have to, like, close the series out and not have to say, like, oh, I never did Nick Fuentes. And to remind people, like, the far right is not typically on a lot of lefties' radar in regards to a lot of things. But this is one particular case where it's, like, pay attention. Like, you don't have to follow, like, all of his, like, ins and outs, but, like, pay attention a little bit. Okay, well, a decent bit. Because unlike a lot of other people in the far right, Fuentes is not only going nowhere, but they're going to the point where it's starting to move beyond him. Or it's probably already been that way up to that point. Anyways, thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click the bell to notify when a future video mine comes out. And if you're interested in more content from me, you can go to my website, follow me on Twitter, join my Discord, or consider supporting me on Patreon.